Okay, so I've been making sourdough for about 4 years now, and one of the things that I found hardest was how to actually shape the loaves once the main part of the bread is finished fermenting. So there's going to be a lot of people making sourdough for the first time, and I just wanted to make a short video to show you what I do, because I think it will probably help to get your head around how to handle this kind of really sticky dough. So in terms of what you need, I've got some flour. That's the regular white flour that I've used to make the loaf. I've got this stainless steel protector on my work surface, so this gives me a metal surface to work against. And then I've got this dough knife here, which again, that's a sharp metal edge. These are my two sort of baskets that the loaves are going to go into. And then in this bowl here, I've got the dough that I've been fermenting all day. I think I put this on about 10 o'clock this morning, and it's 9:30 at night. So in here there is 70% hydrated sourdough. What that means is there's a kilo of flour and there's 700 grams of water in there, so that's where the 70% comes from. The makeup of this particular sourdough is about 150 grams of spelt, about 100 grams of wholemeal flour, brown flour, and then that's about 250 grams, and then 750 grams of white flour. But actually it really doesn't matter, it's all the same. The way that you approach is all the same, no matter what the flour blend is in there. And I've also got some seeds, pumpkin seeds in the bread. But like I say, the technique, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter what's in there, the technique is the same. Okay, so this is now fully fermented, which I can tell because it's reached the level of the top of this bowl, and that's how I measure it. And you can see sitting on the top is my dough scraper, so that's kind of floated the way to the top. We want to handle this quite carefully and not really sort of mash it down and squeeze it out, because in here it's full of bubbles of quite sort of boozy smelling carbon dioxide. And that is part of what gives the bread its really nice taste, so we don't want to sort of really drive all of that stuff out, so we want to keep this quite gently. So here we go, so here's the technique. So first thing, just get a little bit of flour to stop it from sticking. So a little pinch, put that over there, smooth it, and then I'm going to get my bowl. I'm just going to tip this out. Look, you can see how sticky and how runny this is. It's kind of pouring out the bowl. That's really wet. It's really wet and sticky. And this is kind of partly what makes it a bit hard to deal with. So I'm just kind of scraping out the last bits of this bowl, sticking that on there, and get this bowl out of the way now. And that's it. We're done with this as well. We're not going to need this anymore. And then the next thing I'm going to do is just try and fold this dough over until it's in more of a neat, compact ball, and that's going to make it easier to cut into two and start shaping it into two loaves. So starting over at the far side, I'm just going to get this dough scraper, and I'm just going to scrape it underneath there and just lift it over, and then I'm going to do that quarter and that quarter and that quarter, so you'll see what I'm doing. So I'll start over on the far side. It's really sticky, but I'm giving it a good stretch and folding it over. And I'm going to come to here, give it a stretch, do the same thing, come to here, give it a stretch, do the same thing, come to here, give it a pull, lift it over. Now, you can see that the tension has built up in this already, but I can get this a little bit tighter just by shoving in from the sides and just kind of moving it around on this surface. And this is what's really nice about using the metal on metal, is that it doesn't really stick that much. So this, although that's really sticky, it's not really sticking to the surface that much. You can still see it's still nice and airy. You can see these bubbles starting to form on the top. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is try and cut this in half. Now, the more time goes on, the more better that you're going to be at just kind of judging this by eye and never kind of weigh it out. If my two loaves are slightly different weights, well, so what, it doesn't really matter. But if you can get it into a roughly circular shape, then you can do it by eye and it's somewhat easier. get a little bit of flour, so about that much, and just kind of run that down the middle, down the line where I'm going to cut, and then in just a few sharp moves. Going to cut that in two. Now this bit here, where I've cut that into, that's going to be essentially the inside of my loaf, and this bit on the outside is going to be the top and the outside of my loaf. So we'll start with this one here. Just going to try and use the dough scraper just to shape this into something a bit more of a ball. I'm just kind of shoving in from each side and carefully picking it up as I go. Now I haven't got flour on my hands. Okay, I'm not adding a lot of extra flour, it's just that little tiny bit that I put on there and the bit on the surface. You really don't want to be adding lots of flour at this stage. I'm just going to keep this moving around until we've got it in something of a tighter ball. And sometimes it's just easier if you just pick the whole thing up and just tuck it under itself. And what you're going to end up with is something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, I'm going to do the second one without talking now because it's hard to talk and concentrate at the same time. So, now that is still really sticky. It's really sticking to my fingers, but I'm not handling it very much. And I'm just doing most of the shoving with this metal blade, and it's not really sticking to the metal blade. So my aim here is I want to try and get two really quite tight balls to the back of my surface. So I'm just kind of shoving along with the blade under here, and you see it's all tightening. You see those seeds starting to come to the surface now of the bread. And then I'm just going to move that up to the back. And it's going to sit there, and I'll just quickly tighten this one up as well. Okay, so I've now got my two loaves. They're ready to go, but I'm just going to let this sit here for about 10 minutes. And this stage is called bench resting. And what this is going to do is all of this kind of gluten that's in here and these layers, it'll just give it a little bit of a chance to relax and shape out, because we're going to shape these two balls of dough again before they go into the baskets. But if we try and do it now, then there's a chance that we might tear the bread, and that's not what we want to do. This needs to be sort of like chewing gum. It needs to be able to sort of stretch, not tear. So in order to be able to do that, it's going to sit there for about 10 minutes. So I will start the recording now, and then I'll come back in about 10 minutes time. Okay, so that's been 10 minutes resting on here, and as you can see, both of the balls of dough have kind of puffed out and relaxed out a bit, so they're a little bit more kind of pancake shaped. So now I've got to get them shaped ready to go into these baskets. So technique, it's fairly straightforward. We're really just going to put one fold into each of these loaves. So first off, I'm just going to get a small pinch of flour and just chuck it into my basket here. One for this one over here. And then I'm just going to get a small amount of flour and put it on the top of the loaves themselves. So a little bit there, a little bit more there, a little bit there. Not loads, but we're just trying to help it from sticking onto here when we turn it over. So I'm going to describe the technique and then do it because it's easier to describe it and then and then concentrate on actually doing it. So I'm going to use this dough knife just to unstick it from the surface and then flip this thing over. So this is going to be the top of our loaf, and our loaf is going to go upside down into this basket over here. So I'm going to flip it over and then I'm going to fold the bottom up. I'm going to stretch two sides out, fold one over the top of the other, and then I'm going to pull the top part over and I'm going to shape that into a ball. Okay, so let's get this flour out of the way, get a bit more space. So, just got my bread unstuck from the surface and then flip it onto its back like that. So this is our sort of really sticky inside of the loaf. Seed sticking to my finger. Right, so stretch the bottom bit and pull it over the top. Get the right hand end, stretch it over into the middle. Get the left hand end, stretch it over to the middle. Get the top of the loaf, pull it over the top. And then, there we go. That's folded and ready to go. Now, as quick as you like. Put your hand on the top there just to support it. Get it underneath there. Stick it upside down and put it in there. Okay, same thing again with this one. I'm going to get the knife. Going to get it unstuck from the work surface. Flip this over. Going to get the bottom, fold it in. And 2 bits at the side. Fold them into the middle. I'm going to get the top, fold it over. And there's my loaf. So, get my second basket, hand on the top, that underneath, flip it and put it in there. Like that. Last thing I'm going to do, a little tiny bit of flour, just on the top, little tiny bit. Fold these things over. And then these are going into the fridge overnight. I always do the last stage of fermentation in the fridge because it slows everything right down. And it doesn't matter if the last stage takes 5 hours or 24 hours. All that's going to happen is some of the more acidic flavours are going to develop in there the longer that you leave it. But the bread won't really over ferment. So timing is not critical. And it's, 9:30, 10 to 10 at night. So it just means that whenever I get up tomorrow morning, I'll just put the oven on, and then when they're ready to get baked, they'll come straight out of the fridge and they'll go straight into the oven. And I'll try and film that tomorrow so that you can see what that sort of final stage looks like. But that's it for now, and I'll just kind of put these in the fridge and then leave it there. Okay, so it's now 20 past 11 in the morning, so a bit later than I was expecting it to be, but that's okay, because the proving loaf has been in the fridge overnight. So I just wanted to show you how to prepare the loaf to go into the oven. Until a couple of years ago, the way that I was baking the bread was using one of these things. This is a Dutch oven. And if you haven't got one of these or haven't got a specialist oven, get one of these and use this to bake in. So these are really heavy, they're cast iron. This cost me about £25 from TK Maxx. And what's special about it is it really retains the heat, and it means that when you put the bread in the oven, the heat carries on sort of flowing into the bread. And with this particular one, it used to have a knob on the top there which I unscrewed, and the way that I would use it, by putting it upside down into my oven for about an hour, getting it really screaming hot, and then using a really thick pair of oven gloves, take it out, take the top bit off, put my bread on there, cover it up, put that in the oven and bake it in there, and that was giving me absolutely brilliant, well-risen loaves. Now, more recently, I bought on eBay a catering oven. This is a really dodgy, flaky catering oven, but it does get nice and hot, and I can inject steam into the back of the oven. So I was baking so regularly that was worthwhile. But like I say, if you don't have the luxury of an oven like that, and you're just using a regular oven, get one of these. I'm going to use my my catering oven to make this loaf. So let's move this one out of the way. So, get some flour out. Process is relatively straightforward. You need your loaf that's been proving in the fridge overnight. You need a peel to put it in the oven. You need a razor blade or a sharp knife to score it with. You need a little bit of flour. So, very small amount of flour on there just to stop it from sticking. And here's our loaf, which is kind of expanded out and filled the filled the basket a little bit more. This top is still really sticky, but it's now really cold, so it's not going to present too much of a problem for us. So take this thing, put your hand under, stop it dropping out, drop your loaf onto there. Take the razor blade, and this is quite a firm move. Just get hold of the bread down at one end to steady it, and slash the top. And that's really all you have to do. And then this thing goes in the oven now for about 45 minutes. Because the oven is a bit dodgy, I'll turn it a couple of times, and then I will do one more video showing it once it's come out of the oven and finished. Okay, so in a hilarious turn of events, I put the first loaf into my posh oven, and my posh oven has actually died, which is brilliant. So I had to dig out the Dutch oven and do the second loaf in there because the first loaf was a write-off. And this is the finished result. So this is still really warm. You can see that it's risen nicely, that it's split down the seam that I scored with the shaving razor blade, and you can see there's some really nice blistered pockets out there on the surface. So this at the moment is just about, it's not quite too hot to touch, but it's still really hot. Whatever you do, just ignore the notion of nice warm bread straight from the oven. You'll wreck your sourdough loaf if you cut into it at this point, because you'll lose a lot of steam and a lot of moisture from it. So you need to let this cool down and come to room temperature before you slice it. It's going to get better and better over the next couple of days. So if you can wait another 24 hours before you slice into it, that will be at its optimum. And then as time goes on, it won't get mouldy, but it will get a bit drier, so you're going to be using it more for toast and for croutons later on rather than for sandwiches straight away. But yep, there we go. That is how to shape, fold, second ferment, score and bake sourdough loaf.